What's going on, FA Nation? Welcome back. This is the 2 minute drill recapping week 5. I'm Dan Malin. I'm joined by James Grande. Grande, how was week 5 for you? DFS wise, it's getting ugly out there. It's consistently ugly. I was fortunate that my NASCAR lineups made up for my lone NFL lineup this week. But it was brutal for someone like me who only did about 2 hours of research.
Yeah, I mean, um, DFS was DFS. I think in terms of DFS, I make my money come NBA season. That is definitely my most profitable part of the year. We were just talking, we're recording during the Monday Night Football game, and I've had a good showing in Showdown. I cashed the Giants Showdown against the Packers, and then I cashed Sunday Night Football. But main slate was brutal. Seasonal again was a good week for me. I've had 4 to 5 good weeks. Shout out Travis Kelce for just securing the bag, as the youth would say, Dan, in a victory. So seasonal good, DFS 50-50 because Showdown has been good, but main slate not so great, Bob.
I'm almost with you. I remember, I think I'm going to say it was like a week or two ago. We were talking about the main slate. And every week I'll do 5 lineups. I'll do a cash lineup. I'll do 3 GPP lineups for 3 entry max, and then I'll do a single entry GPP lineup. Basically, it's the Mike McClure method, and I've been subscribing to it for like the last 2 years, and it's been incredibly profitable. But cash games this year have been incredibly frustrating. Whether it's, I'm not going to rely on injuries too much because injuries are always a part of the game, but it's
Right.
just the chalk is either falling flat, paying
Right.
up for running back hasn't worked out. It's just been a little tougher against all the lineup trains because it's like they have a heavier presence this year.
Right.
It just hasn't been as good, and it's weird because honestly my biggest returns have been on my GPP lineups, and so I think for a little while I'm just going to lay off cash games.
Yep.
And strictly just do like three GPP lineups, throw them into an array of 20 max contests, 3 max contests. Uh, just ease off the gas with cash games lately because on DK it has been brutal. And last week was far worse than this week. At least I was able to collect some money back from other sports. But yeah, like GPPs, showdowns, that's where I've had most of my success. The main slate cash games have been a nightmare for the most part.
I mean, just look at like if you take the last and I think it's like 2 weeks ago we get the Geno Smith Lions game where the winning Millie Maker has 6 members of that game in the lineup. And then you look at it this week in a game in Buffalo where sure, like if you had Josh Allen, good for you, but like you're playing cash, right? Are you going to play Gabe Davis? Are you going to play Khalil Shakur? No, you're going to play Stephon Diggs. But Stephon Diggs was not optimal this week. Although he had a good game, wasn't optimal based on price and based on what his teammates did. So like, yeah, I mean that's frustrating. That's tough to like withstand. I mean, Jalen Hurts off to a great start and a lot of people's lineups and then does nothing in the second half. I mean, it's been a really tough season to grasp. Tom Brady had a touchdown to Mike Evans. Mike Evans down at the 1. Guess what happens?
I think he had one to Godwin too, also down at the 1.
Yep, and then we're at both vultured. So like, it's really tough to overcome stuff like that when especially with someone like Tom Brady, who I was all over this week. I was on my timeline. Has dominated Atlanta thoroughly for the last however many years, 28-3, dating back to the 28-3 Patriot days. But like with Brady, where he doesn't make it up on the ground, you can't make it up, and it's really hurting it's really hurting tournaments, hurting cash plays. It's so yeah, Dan, I think as someone who does mainly play tournaments, I do have plans to play cash games for basketball this year, but like light. And I did that for baseball too, light. Like I do not it's very hard to beat lineup chains unless you're playing single entries. But even then, like you said, you do play single entry cash games and you're still going up against lineup trains. So lineup providers aren't going anywhere. So you just have to alter the way you play when faced with that challenge.
Well, transitioning from lineup trains to another kind of train, Taysom Hill stole the show yesterday on the Week 5 slate. And I, as someone who has played Taysom Hill twice so far this season at tight end, to miss out on this performance was gut wrenching. Scored 3 touchdowns on the ground, threw for another. He was pretty much a cheat code on Sunday. But here we are once again, and we're recording this during Monday Night Football. And I really hate when he does this because then you have to answer so many questions about, is Taysom Hill a consistent starter every week? And I still can't buy into it simply because he ranks as like a. I've heard a variety of where he ranks in tight ends. I've heard he's tight end 3. I've heard he's tight end 7, but he only has one target on the year as a tight end. And it's so damn frustrating when you have to try and consider what this guy can do because I played him during the London game and I was happy just to get one rushing touchdown out of him.
Right.
And then I see him go off for 4 touchdowns this week. But it's going to be the case like when you pick him up and you spend fab on him and you play him, he's going to do nothing. And then it's when you drop him or you leave him on your bench, that's when he's going to go off. It's the ceiling is so high, but at the same time, you could be eating, maybe 2 or 3 points at the tight end position on a weekly basis.
I mean, it's extremely tough because you look at the landscape of the tight end position, right? Like, let's remove Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce, right? We're just taking them out of the equation. Off the top of your head, who's been good this year at tight end? Consistent. Let me take that back. Consistent.
Okay.
I mean,
Kyle Pitts has been consistently bad.
Fair. Okay. That's one.
Conklin, maybe.
Conklin, Tyler Higbee, right? Those are probably like the first 2 names. Maybe like David Njoku has been pretty good over the last few weeks. But like, it's such a bad position that like where I agree that generally it's like, well, there might be games where he just has 4 rushes. But what if one of those go for a touchdown, like you said in the London game?
That's basically what you're hoping for.
And you know what? It's working right now. Yeah. I mean, he has 2. To your point, right now he ranks as tight end 8. He has 2 top 3 finishes at the position. Granted, week 5 he's currently tight end 1. That's obviously subject to change with Travis Kelce still playing. So we don't know what Travis Kelce's going to do. But I mean, unless Travis Kelce has 4 touchdowns, And can Travis Kelce recover a fumble and make a game-winning block? No, I don't think so. No, I mean, look, I agree, and it's very frustrating, especially for someone who owns Alvin Kamara or has Chris Olave or who has pass catchers on, New Orleans. But I really do think we're getting to a point where Pat Freiermuth went out with an injury this year, concussion protocol. That's his 3rd concussion in 2 years. Is he going to play next week with these new sanctions and stuff in place? I don't think so. I mean, it's hard to predict like injury, and we've talked about this. I don't really want to go down that path, but his 3rd concussion in 2 years, came off the field, instantly ruled out concussion. Darren Waller tonight, questionable to return. Haven't seen him on the field since, right? So that's 2 of the top presumed 12 tight ends out. Kyle Pitts out. 3 of the top 12 presumed tight ends out. I know I'm missing somebody else. There was another tight end, Dalton Schultz. He went out. He was hobbling around, had to come off the field, limped off to the sideline. Logan Thomas was a late scratch. Like, the tight end position is really bad, and it's not getting any better. And you're not safe, honestly. 2 weeks from now, guess who returns? DeAndre Hopkins. All your Zach Ertz shares probably going to fall to a bottomless pit because he's already struggling. Well, I guess I shouldn't say struggling. He's been pretty consistent, but I mean, we know DeAndre Hopkins is the big dog in that offense. I think Taysom Hill is a weekly start at tight end until he's not. And I know it's going to be different with Jameis. I was just looking at some stats. Week 1 with Jameis Winston on the field.
He rushed for 80 yards.
He rushed for 80 yards, 16 snaps. So, not as much as we saw this week. Week 2, Dan, was where we really saw the impact of like Taysom Hill, where you were talking about like where he might not do anything and you're kind of relying on a touchdown. 6 total snaps, 2 as a quarterback or 2 as a receiver, 1 in pass protection, 3 rushes. So like you're going to have those weeks with Taysom Hill, especially that's with James Winston at quarterback, right? So like we have to take that into consideration. But 2 top, let's say 2 finishes at the position, at a position that stinks. If you are in dire straits, you just lost somebody like a Waller, like a Freiermuth, like a Schultz. He's viable, whether we want him to be, because I think the most of us don't want him to be. Whether we like that or not, I do think Taysom Hill is going to be viable in fantasy. And for you and I and the rest of the fantasy community, we're going to have to answer questions about him the rest of the year. It just is what it is. And unless there's, I mean, seriously, unless there's like a clear-cut matchup that we like somebody in, Taysom Hill is going to probably be a better option than them.
All right, let's transition to Seattle. Rashad Penny goes down. I heard it was a broken tibia in his leg.
I think it was I think they announced it was officially a fibula.
I
think it was a clean break, and they announced out for the year.
That absolutely sucks, especially coming off the game he had last week against Detroit. But Kenneth Walker time in Seattle. Obviously, we have questions that we want to answer, like what's the upside, how much fab should you spend? But if you take away a 69-yard run in week 4, he's averaging just 3.5 yards per carry. But there's no arguing against the volume, and that is a big aspect of fantasy football running back success. You don't need to be the most talented player. If you have opportunity and touches, you're going to be, at worst, a flex play, but we're going to be talking about Kenneth Walker as a potential RB2 the rest of the way. So do you think he can finish as a top 15 running back, and how much fab are you spending on Walker if he's available in your league?
Do you want the exact number if he's available?
I've heard on various sites it ranges from like 50 to like 58%.
I'm going 100% on my fab. Here's why. Like, do you know, like, there's the theories that like after week 1 is the best time to spend all your to maximize your fab spending, right? Because it's like, okay, these guys could be like injuries and whatever, and then there's players that take over, and then it's like you're never going to get a better opportunity to on the waiver wire than after week 1. That is true until somebody like Kenneth Walker comes around, who is already presumably going to be a guy that's took this job by whenever we saw Rashad Penny get hurt next, essentially, right? Because that's what everyone was waiting for. Everyone was waiting for the Rashad Penny injury, and as unfortunate as it is, it happened again. Now, this was obviously a bad luck injury, as like instead of one of those nagging injuries that Rashad Penny's had seemingly every year. But Kenneth Walker is electric. He was electric in college. He gets into the end zone. He's a powerful dude. He's fast. He can catch passes out of the backfield. It's a really good offense. I know I don't think we expected to say that about Seattle. It is a really good offense where Geno Smith looks like, I mean, just a literal different player than he's ever looked in his whole life. I would spend in another position that's injury riddled, right? I mean, I know I traded for Jonathan Taylor in a league. I was without him this past week, scrambling to get somebody in there. People lost Javonte Williams. I mean, there's been a plethora of injuries at the position, plus all the combos of guys like, oh, Breece Hall is a guy, but Michael Carter still gets 2 touchdowns on the goal line. I mean, all these Leonard Fournette and Rachaad White suddenly in like a timeshare. Like there's so many timeshares. There's so many guys that Kenneth Walker is the guy. Like there is no one there. DJ Dallas is going to play on passing downs, I think, occasionally. I think he played 3 passing snaps after Rashad Penny got hurt. But you're not going to find an RB1 or potential RB2 just sitting on your waiver wire like this. So look, if you're uncomfortable spending 100% of your fab, I get it. But not many opportunities are going to just fall into your lap like this. Like if you are the top priority waiver, spend as much money as you possibly can to acquire an RB2 with RB1 upside. I don't know if you feel as strongly as I do, but
I mean, I do, because we try to be careful when we throw around this term and I've been burned on it in the past, most notably like a year or two ago when I applied it to Chase Claypool. But Kenneth Walker shapes up to be a league winner. I had low expectations for Seattle and their offense this year. I didn't think that Geno's, well, to be fair, nobody really thought
No,
Geno
I
was going
don't
to
think
really
anybody
do this,
did.
except maybe Geno and his mom. Um, but well, Pete Carroll coming into the year thought he had like
True.
two QB1s.
True.
Uh,
True.
but anyway, yeah, you look at the situation, and the Seattle offense has held up great so far. I'm still not completely sold on the offensive line, but they actually haven't been terrible. It's kind of like a bend but don't break mentality.
Right.
The offense does look great. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett look like, man, I can't believe, like, if we were talking about just avoiding them altogether in fantasy, and like it's just a renaissance in Seattle. But given the workload and just the pure like talent pedigree of Kenneth Walker, you have to assume that he could probably finish as a high end RB2, low end RB1 from here on out. But I do want to transition to another rookie running back, one that you briefly touched on, and I'm of the mindset that last week I was willing to buy high on Brees Hall. I
Yep.
still subscribe to that theory. He has 39 total touches in his last two games. And you did mention that Michael Carter stole a couple goal line carries for a pair of touchdowns. But those came on very long Brees Hall runs.
Yep.
So if he can just make it one extra yard, he's the one in the end zone. So I'm still fine buying high on Brees Hall because if he does score, you're probably going to have to pay an even bigger price. And I'm still not that worried about Michael Carter because even when Michael Carter scored his touchdowns, Brees Hall was still on the field. Are you okay buying high on Brees Hall?
Yeah, and I wasn't. It wasn't necessarily me being like concerned necessarily about Carter scoring the touchdowns because I know they just came after like plays where Brees Hall does not have any gas left in the tank after the runs that he was going through and the people that he was plowing through like bowling pins. Um, yeah, I mean, I wanted to buy Brees Hall a couple weeks ago when his snap share went from 20 to like 50%. I was like, whoa, like that was a big deal. And then they get Wilson back and it goes from 50 to 65%. You're like, okay, this is clearly like a transition together, right? Like we're getting Zach Wilson back and we're putting Brees Hall in the field. Like we're getting as many playmakers on the field as possible. Yeah, I mean, I also think that the window is probably closed. I think unless you're coming to someone who like desperately needs a receiver and giving them anything but like a wide receiver one, um, it's going to be hard to acquire Brees Hall. I think if you have Brees Hall right now, you're extremely happy. I mean, he's currently RB8 in standard. He's currently RB7 in PPR. And that's coming off, a week. He's only been over 50% of the snaps in two games. So wheels up for Brees Hall. And, if you can buy, and I wouldn't be selling. I think it's just nothing but up from here for Brees Hall.
Who do you think has the better finish rest of season, Kenneth Walker or Brees Hall?
I am pretty certain Brees Hall finishes a top 12 running back, and I would probably put Kenneth Walker in like top 15 range. So I'll go Brees Hall, but it wouldn't be surprised if either of them or both of them finished RB1s.
All right, I want to briefly talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars because everybody that has been watching football this year thought the Jaguars were in a great spot in both season long and DFS. I played two of them in my cash lineup, and that's a big reason why I didn't find myself in the green. But James Robinson has seen back-to-back weeks of under 30 yards rushing. It was also a very frustrating game for Christian Kirk. Travis Etienne has been getting more work. Even though the Jags as a team in a great matchup against Houston just absolutely laid an egg. But has the torch officially been passed to ETN? Is it maybe a time to try and see what you can get for James Robinson because it hasn't looked good the last couple of weeks, and we may have just been overhyping the Jaguars.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because the snaps are clearly going towards ETN.
They're trending in the wrong direction for Robinson.
Yeah. ETN over 50% the last 2 weeks. Robinson under or floating around 40% the last 2 weeks. I don't want to say it, James Robinson is dead because he's been so good. It's also been kind of boomer bust though. Like he's had a couple big runs to really pat, pad his stats. And ETN is not a guy. I mean, ETN can just catch 7 balls for 50 yards and call it a day. And so, yeah, I mean, I think ETN was being drafted higher for a reason. I think the upside was always there with ETN compared to James Robinson. I'm not like, are there 24 better running backs than James Robinson? I mean, we have to start 2 running backs, right? Essentially in every league that we all play in. I mean, obviously minus funky scoring leagues and whatnot, but I don't think there are 24, I don't think there are 24 backs better than James Robinson, even with even in a timeshare with ETN. I guess it would be close. Even if he's like RB 25, 26, 27, like I'm
still flex play.
Yeah, he's still a flex play. It's obviously, a little. I mean, that was the dream matchup, and he just sucked. And I don't know, like there was nothing else. I mean, Jacksonville in general did. We had the Trevor Lawrence where he needed to just throw the ball away, and he throws the worst interception you'll ever see in your life. Maybe that turns into a James Robinson touchdown the next play. Who knows? He still gets goal line work and whatnot. But if you can sell James Robinson, sure. But what are you getting in return? If you need receiver, sure. But what is the equal return if you're trading him for a running back? Like that, I don't know. And for that reason, like
do Antonio Gibson? Probably not.
I'm all out. I'm all out on Antonio Gibson. I mean, look what happened. I mean, Brian Robinson comes back. By the way, the most badass entrance.
Instantly got more touches than him too.
And can we just talk about the entrance? I don't know if you saw the entrance, but he came out to Many Men by 50 Cent. And it was like the coolest thing ever because they let him come out on the field after everybody else. And it was just like the most goosebump moment you'll ever. I mean, 5 weeks ago, the guy was shot. Like, Brian Robinson, like, you're inspiration to everyone. But 32% of the snaps for Antonio Gibson. I mean, it's here. You ready for the 5-week snap share of Antonio Gibson?
Go for it.
Week 1, 64. Week 2, 54. Week 3, 44. Week 4, 41. Week 5, 32. No. No to your question. I would rather have James Robinson. I know Antonio Gibson has still somehow given us 7+ fantasy points in all his matchups. But he's going to be walking into a lot more special teams rooms meetings moving forward with Brian Robinson back. So
right. Let's you and I can take some collective victory laps here because your New York Giants went to London, shocked the world, and beat the Green Bay Packers. My New England Patriots held the most explosive offense in football, or one of them, to 0 points. What a weekend for us.
Go us, Dan. Go us.
Look at us. Look at us. But you in our notes for the podcast, you asked, am I stashing Wan'Dale Robinson or Kadarius Toney? It's got to be Robinson for me at this point, only because, like, I don't know what the issue is with Toney. I don't follow the team as closely as you do. The injuries persist with Toney. We saw the one massive game he had last year, and until he can give us another performance like that, like, his DFS's price is always going to be super cheap. And when it first came out for week 1 and he was 4,100 on DraftKings, I was like, that's way too cheap to drive his upside. But obviously he's had an issue staying on the field. So right now, I'm more interested in Wan'Dale Robinson. But honestly, I don't have too much interest in any Giants nor Patriots, although I know there were a couple guys we were talking about in the Patriots beforehand that you're interested in. But I would love to see Daniel Bellinger get a much bigger role in the Giants because when you just watch him play with the ball in his hand, like, he just passes the eyeball test. He's down. He's big. He scored a rushing touchdown this past week. He only had 3 targets this past week, but I mean, Saquon Barkley and Darius Slayton were the only players to have more than 3. And Daniel Jones only threw it 20 times in a competitive game. That gives me some concern. But if I'm just watching a tight end that I really like, Bellinger is actually a very impressive player, a guy that I would love to see get a bigger workload. Until then, can't really do anything for him in season-long fantasy. But as far as the eyeball test goes, he passes it.
So I'm probably a little higher on Bellinger. I don't disagree. Like, Yeah, the targets haven't been great, but 5-3-3, and then in one of the games where he only has one target, he scores a touchdown. He's had 9 or more fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games, which I think, is pretty good. I also think the thing to consider, week 1, he's only on special teams, but he was coming back from the injury.
Mhm.
Week 2, he plays 58% of the snaps. Week 3 and 4 plays 60. Week 5, Dan, this week, 74% of the snaps. Ran 20 routes on 27 passes. So like that Tanner Hudson, where like Tanner Hudson was running all these routes and Daniel Bellinger was like running routes but also blocking. That shifted where Tanner Hudson ran 15 of 27 routes. Daniel Bellinger ran 20. I also think getting Wandale, getting Tony Hamstring. I don't know if you saw he changed his name legally to Kadarius Tony Hamstring, because that's all he had. He's always hampered with hamstring injuries, so he's now changed his name legally.
Clever.
But I think Bellinger, when those guys come back, it's just things are going to open up for Bellinger even more. Who do the defense need to target on or hone in on? Daniel Bellinger and apparently Darius Slayton. And that's it, because the offense stinks. And Saquon Barkley, obviously. So I do have interest in Bellinger. Again, it's a really bad position, and he's scoring touchdowns. He's the only guy other than Saquon scoring touchdowns right now. So in a really desperate move, if you have Freiermuth, have Schultz, Taysom's not available, I think Bellinger is a 14-team league stash. I agree on Wandale. He's the receiver that this regime drafted. They took him in the second round. They didn't draft Tony last year. That was the previous they who must not be named regime. So yeah, I think Wandale is a stash. In one league, I'm actually stashing both. Only because I have the bench spots, I have the IR spots available. What Dan, I do have to ask though, if they're both out again, do you dare, let's say 12 to 14 team league, do you dare look at Darius Slayton on the waiver wire? 6 receptions, 79 yards. And he would have the one target that he did not catch would have been an 80-yard touchdown if he just turned his head. Yeah. And you commented, I tweeted out, and then you commented on it.
You don't have to read what I said.
It literally would have been an 80-yard touchdown if he just looked at the football. And then he proceeded to catch the next 6 passes after that and shut me up. So would, in a 12-14 team league, if you're desperate, would you consider Darius Slayton if there's no Robinson, if there's no Tony?
Yeah, it would have to be a 14-team league. I don't think I'd have any interest in a 12-team league. Definitely not a 10-teamer. Because the narrative with the Giants pass catchers, especially in DFS every week, is that you can pay down for these pass catchers like Richie James, or no one's paying down for Sills. But, I mean, they need pass catchers. And so I was a little surprised when I looked at the showdown slate and I saw Darius Slayton's price tag, and so I wrote him up, and I was pretty happy with the return.
Right.
Did. And we've seen him have big games in the past too. He's been a pretty decent deep threat on that team. But I know you have your concerns. 14-team league, I could see it. I don't know how often I'd play him. It obviously wouldn't be with a ton of confidence either, because I haven't really loved how much the Giants have allowed Daniel Jones to throw the ball. And when you have Saquon Barkley, who looks every bit as good as who he was 3-4 years ago, you don't really need to be forcing the ball deep.
No, and Saquon's the QB1.
Yeah.
And he's RB1, QB1. So speaking of our running back, how about your team, Dan? Some running back, some exciting things going on. What about
exciting things going on, except I played Damian Harris in my cash game. So yet another reason why my cash lineup went to complete garbage this weekend. But I'm not going to dwell too much on that, because I won't ever complain about my cash lineup not hitting if a player gets hurt. It's out of my hands. I can't see it happening. But in his place, Ramondre Stevenson had a hell of a game, 26 carries for 161 yards, and he caught a pair of passes as well. Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be the concern that no matter who's healthy, who's injured for the Patriots, is that it'll always turn into a committee somehow. But Bill Belichick even gave Stevenson a pretty, a big endorsement at his presser on Monday. And so I think, Ramondre Stevenson is a must-start player going forward. I don't know the schedule off the top of my head. They have the Browns next week, then the Bears and the Jets and the Colts. I'm pretty sure you can run effectively. I mean, we just saw Austin Eckler carve up the Browns. The Bears defense isn't great, but they've relied on some big plays. Still not too worried about the Jets, Colts, maybe, but ultimately, like, it's a friendly schedule. He will get fed. They're still not going to allow Bailey Zappi or Brian or Mac Jones, like whoever is
Right.
quarterback. They're not going to allow them to be throwing it too much. So going forward, I mean, you almost like it's without question you're locking Ramondre Stevenson into your lineup, and you can feel good about it while Damian Harris is out. But you seem a little more bullish on Jacoby Myers than I am, because this is where I am worried about who's throwing the ball.
I mean, like, I don't disagree, but like, there's obviously going to be some concern with Jacoby Myers because I think with all Patriot pass catchers, who's going to be throwing him the ball? Bailey Zappi looked like he could sling it a little bit. And we know Mac Jones can sling a little bit. And when you look at what Jacoby Myers has done in the 3 games he's been on the field this year, 80% snaps or more, including a 90% snap this game. 6 or more targets, 6, 13, 8 are the 3 games in which he's played this year. 7, 9, 4 receptions, 2 games in which he's had 95 or more yards. Jacoby Myers, the underneath route guy, has a 24-yard reception or better in all 3 games. So, 13 yards per reception for a guy who's only running a few yards off the line, not too shabby. So if we're going to continue to get all this stuff from Jacoby Myers, that's suggesting that he's not just an underneath guy and he's going to get volume, but also kind of stretch the field. And also, the caveat, the cherry on top, score a freaking touchdown. I mean, yeah, I think Jacoby Myers has a chance to be a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 weekly, which means weekly start, because if he's a wide receiver 3, he's likely going to be starting in your flex. I think he has some pretty favorable matchups, especially, considering how good he's been. So yeah, I do like Jacoby Myers. No, and if Bailey Zappi can get him the ball that way, I mean, Mac Jones can definitely get him the ball when Mac Jones is back.
All right, we've gone a little bit long in the podcast, so we'll go through a little bit of a rapid fire just to wrap it up. Waiver wire ads. Who are your favorites this week? I see that you are a little bullish on Damian Williams coming off IR following week 6.
Yeah, I mean, I like Damian Williams. We'll see. There was a report where he said, like, I'm mentally there. We have to be there physically too. So we'll see where Damian Williams is. I love Eno Benjamin. We have to find out what James Conner's rib injury is and Darrell Williams' knee injury, how serious both those are. But if either of those guys miss time, Eno Benjamin looked awfully good in that game against Philly. Alec Pierce had a great performance on Thursday night. Do we really want to trust a secondary pass catcher from Indianapolis? I don't know, but if Jonathan Taylor misses any more time, I mean, Matt Ryan might be forced to throw, especially with Nyheim Hines out too. Like, no Hines, no Taylor, and Pierce becomes a guy, maybe a deep league ad. Obviously, Kenneth Walker is the number 1 ad of the week. We don't need to go through that, but number 1 ad on the week. Rachaad White, I mean, the playing time has been tremendous for him, and Leonard Fournette asked for it. He asked the Tampa Bay Bucks to give Rachaad White more time. That's seemingly coming true. And we talked about Taysom Hill. I think he's in play. I think Daniel Bellinger is in play. Both giant receivers, Wandale and Tony, probably available on your waiver wire more than likely. And then Hayden Hurst, old reliable. I liked him going in the landing spot, going to Cincinnati. We saw CJ Uzama with big games last year, even with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins healthy. I don't know if it's T. Higgins dependent, but the correlation of Hayden Hurst being great and then T. Higgins not playing when everyone thought he was going to play on Sunday night was, maybe something to consider. But I do think Hayden Hurst, given the tight end scarcity, is in play.
All right, you got any believe it or not?
No, we'll save him for next week. We'll
Cool.
leave the people on the cliffhanger just because we ran a little long here.
All right. Well, Grande, thank you so much for your time. Congrats to your Giants. Best of luck to you in week 6, and best of luck to the FA Nation.